Hello, my name's Elijah Wells, and today's review is Edgar Wright's new movie, The Running Man. The movie follows Ben Richards being portrayed by Glenn Powell after his daughter got severely sick from the flu, and of course the medical state of the US is completely in shambles and everyone's living in complete poverty. And of course the top-rated TV show at that point is The Running Man, where contestants have to run away for 30 days while being tracked down by assassins, so he signs up to it in hoping to get some financial compensation to treat his daughter's sickness. The Running Man, this being a remake of the 1987 movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and being based on a 1982 novel by Stephen King, which is, again, essentially about the mindless consumption and the media's control, and of course quite a lot of host of things that are definitely there in the book, and as well as the two movies that came straight afterwards. And particularly with Edgar Wright at the helm of directing this movie, whose best known works are including Shaun of the Dead, World's End, Hot Fuzz, and as well as more action stuff like Baby Driver and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. What makes it having him as director really interest me is not just he announced at some point many years ago on Twitter that he wants to remake this movie, but of course he is probably one of the most visually distinctive directors to be working for now over 20 years at this point, particularly with his sharp and very quick editing, and of course his incredible needle drops and his very distinctive camera work, which again is prevalent through most of his filmography. Particularly with something like The Running Man, which is definitely the much more higher budget stuff and a bit more blockbustery stuff that he's pretty much now used to, rather than more, we'll just say, quirky Britishized stuff like, let's say, Shaun of the Dead, which is his major breakout role, and started the Cornetto trilogy with Hot Fuzz, then later with World's End. And again, this is going to be a very interesting experiment regardless for him. So we'll just see how The Running Man goes. It was also interesting, worth noting, that this is the first collaboration he had with Michael Bacall for since Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, since he co-wrote this movie. Not just that, he also wrote the 21 and 22 Jump Street movies with Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill, and as well as Project X. Then right after these films, he just completely disappeared off the map. Like, in his own Wikipedia page, between Project X and 21, 22 Jump Street, Michael Bacall, the film's writer, pretty much disappeared. Like, I'm not sure the movie was in development for such a long time, or he probably knew him from Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, so he got brought back into the picture, which is, again, something I found somewhat very surprising. And of course, the case of this being a remake, the closest thing he's done to a remake-ish is the Scott Pilgrim Netflix series, which isn't exactly a remake whatsoever, but he is involved in it as an executive producer. But guess what? Other directors have done remakes before, like Christopher Nolan has done it, and Steven Spielberg's done it. Peter Jackson did it with the Lord of the Rings films, which was an animated film in the 70s by Ralph Bakshi. But of course, there's people like Tim Burton who would say their remix is not really that great to begin with. So, no, I'm guessing it was kind of guessing on that logic. Either Edgar Wright was waiting for that one special movie so he can remake it, or he pretty much was just a case of it was a matter of time before he eventually remakes something. But in this case, it's going to be The Running Man. And a lot of the action scenes and a lot of the set pieces, again, expected from Edgar Wright, is incredible in my opinion, particularly how really fast-paced the action is as it latches onto a momentum and just keeps going with it, pretty much on pace and pretty much on beat, which is, again, something that Edgar Wright definitely has loads of capabilities with, even with his more comedic stuff with the Triple Cornetto trilogy, and as well as the more action stuff like Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and Baby Driver, which again have somewhat of a kinetic energy, particularly with his use of music and how the action pretty much complements the action and the music as well. So they pretty much come together and it's just magic happens. One of the setups that did very interest me a lot is particularly when Ben Richards is in a hotel, and of course there are goons pretty much surrounding the hotel, so the way to invade him is pretty much sneaking out of the room with his wearing nothing but a towel since you are showering, and pretty much saying, "Hey, you went downstairs," and go into another room to get back to the other room, of course. And then, of course, another set piece that does interest me quite a bit is trying to light a match, but then it was really a really dimly lit matchstick. Then he found like a porno mag, then lights that away. Then he accidentally tosses it away and sets the entire room up aflame. After it turns out it was like a storage room full of gases. So, and then he finds a little drainage pot and lifts the drainage pipe and heads down to what looks like a sewer, which is again a really cool set piece, which pretty much only Edgar Wright can do. And the problems with the movie I had were not just large, but they were just downright glaring, the problems I had with the movie. Like, for example, like, is this even an Edgar Wright movie? Like, this is like radically different from a lot of his films that he's made so far. Like, is this really a film he wanted to do? I'm not sure this is I'm guessing it may have been a case of studio interference, or he just wanted to be different for just this movie, but I'm gonna have to ask, like, is this really his movie? Like, I'm guessing he was either pressured into making this movie, or studio got a little too involved in this, but I'm kind of guessing, like, was this really his movie? And also, a thing what I found a little bit bizarre is the script was a lot more weaker than his usual, much more sharper stuff. Like, it's a lot more exposition heavy. Like, again, how he uses exposition is definitely, in his previous films, like a lot of he uses exposition for mostly like for foreshadowing, which the movie fabrically does do, like foreshadowing in exposition terms. But in this movie, he takes exposition and he just would just say he went overkill with it to the point. The movie almost feels like you're reading it off the film's Wikipedia list, which is I found a lot more bizarre than usual. And the movie's ending, which I don't want to spoil to you, but if you read the book, it's a lot more faithful to the book, and it just falls flat in my opinion. Like, I feel like they just rushed the ending, as to speak, essentially. As in, I feel like by the time the third act rolls around, particularly when he's completing a mission on a plane, I feel like the movie just went, stop, this is what happens, this and that. Then after the quick interval, I feel like the movie just had to hurry up, like, oh, we're at the 2 hour 10 minute mark, so let's hurry up, let's wrap everything up, so blah blah blah, so let's end it right there. Like, I feel like the ending is just so rushed, like, it just wants to get to the end way too quickly. Like, hold your horses, like, let go on to a gradual slowdown, not just a panic stopped. I do want to give the film again some credit again, because the world building in this film is again really good. Like, not just the usual juxtaposition of the rich versus poor, but also again the world besides outside of the city, which is again a little bit more interesting in my opinion. Like, as in you get to visit Boston, which is a deeply impoverished area. And we also get to see Maine, which is a somewhat impoverished area, but a lot more rural as well. And it's mostly just driving through the countryside. The third act, and of course the third act of the movie, which is again mostly him just slithering around the countryside and going in and out of the Canadian border, which is again some fairly decent world building. But in the city where it goes down, it does have some fairly interesting stuff as well. I wish they dwell into it a little bit more, particularly in the more impoverished areas. Not just the healthcare crisis, but also his former workplace, which they kind of touch on a little bit here and there on the film, but it doesn't go that far into it as it should have. And the characters in this movie are definitely a varied bunch, in my opinion. Like Glenn Powell, who plays Ben Richards in this movie, who definitely has charisma to carry the movie, and definitely has the charm that is definitely there, as you expect from a Glenn Powell performance. And then there's his wife and child who appear in the movie when it's asked to, like, oh, I have a wife and a kid. Oh, I have a wife and kid. And they just appear, like, out of nowhere. And we have Josh Brolin's character, who plays the evil corporate TV exec, who's pretty much his conversations with Ben Richards goes like, be the face of the show, and you've got the spirit, and don't do it because blah 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 blah. That's pretty much his, most of the conversations wrapped up around Josh Brolin's character as the evil corporate exec, who's a TV exec as well. And there's Coleman Domingo, who's the host of The Running Man, who's pretty much yells out exposition whenever it's needed. And of course we have Michael Cera, who is in just one scene in the movie where he says, "Oh, we're doing a resistance against the big evil corporation doing these shows," and then turns his house into a glorified Home Alone trap on a bigger budget. If there is like two words I would describe the Edgar Wright movie, Running Man, it's basically generic and safe as in this point. Like, most of the world building is definitely cool, a lot of the set pieces and action is definitely great, and of course the charisma and charm of Glen Powell is definitely all present in this movie, but I feel like this is a Edgar Wright movie that isn't really that much of an Edgar Wright movie. Like, sure, there's some cool bits and bobs you definitely would see in an Edgar Wright movie. Like, the soundtrack is definitely pretty niche and pretty cool at some instances. And of course, some editing work and some camera work is definitely prevalent from his films that are definitely prevalent in this one. But I feel like it just feels like it's not really that achieving that much to begin with. Like, I feel like the script is definitely a lot weaker than it should be. The exposition that was so heavy in that script pretty much just takes over the movie. The characters are pretty much either dominant in this movie or just somewhat just there in the background and just have that one note to them being expositions or just having somewhat of a weird rotor of lines like Josh Brolin has. Like, I feel like it just feels rushed at this point, particularly with its ending and its third act, where it feels like it just wants to hurry up and just try to get it done. So that's the entire impression I get from this movie. So Running Man, I'm feeling a 6 out of 10 on this one. So, what do you think of The Running Man? Let me know in the comments down below, subscribe to my channel, like this video, and also you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, and Letterboxd. This is Elijah Wells, and bye.